The fantasy professor himself, Frank Karapi. Thanks for being here, Frank.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
As a visitor to our show in the past, and with the NFL season winding down, let's kind of take stock of things. NFL in general, where do you see the Steelers at the end of this season? Do they make the playoffs, or do they don't make the playoffs? 4 games to go, counting their Chargers game this afternoon.
Yeah, I think they make the playoffs. They're getting looks like they're getting Big Ben back this week, and that's obviously very, very important. Although Charlie Batch certainly last week did a terrific job in Baltimore. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the rest of the AFC, I think they're in pretty good position for a wild card spot. They still need to get their running game together, shore up a little bit on defense. But I think the Steelers are going to make some noise. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to win at least one playoff game this year.
Frank, what about the situation in Cleveland? Do you think it's already determined the fate of Pat Shurmur, or it's already done?
I do. I think I mean, although to be honest, I think Pat Shurmur's done a good job this year. I think
so do I.
He's committed to developing his younger players, and he's got some very good younger players. I think that he will go. Obviously, the management. Mike Holmgren's going to be gone. He's already announced. And new ownership typically likes to bring their own people in. But I would say it's about 60-40. I wouldn't be overly surprised if he stuck around, and I think he should get at least another year with that young team, because I think he's done a good job.
Yeah, some good young talent. Whedon and Richardson obviously leading the way in that
Absolutely.
department. And they seem to be learning how to win those close games now, at least the last few weeks.
Yeah, their defense is playing very well. They've got a good young defense. On offense, they've got a good quarterback. They've got a great young running back. They need a little help on the line. They need some receiving help. But the pieces are starting to fall into place there. So.
You know the players, you know the league, so we're going to make you GM of the Raiders for a day. Your team, your favorite team. What do you do out there?
Wow. Oh, wow. Well, I mean, Reggie McKenzie's the GM out there.
Right.
And he came from the Packers, and I have a lot of faith in him. I think you have to keep the coach at least another year. In terms of what I would do with the players, the defense needs a lot of attention. They've got a lot of big contracts still on defense. You got to get rid of some of those. You've got to draft defense. So their defensive line and their offensive line need a lot of work. And so if I was the GM, that's where I'd focus on. They've got a lot of good skill players, but their line play is just so terrible that they just can't do anything on either side of the ball.
Tell us how you really feel about the Raiders.
I mean, it's just, as a Raider fan, it's just been frustrating. I mean, when I was younger, I had a lot of glory.
Commitment to excellence.
But it's been a long time since those glory
What about
days.
all the Gruden talk, though? I mean,
well, I mean, if you can get somebody back like John Gruden, I think you have to do that. Obviously, Reggie McKenzie liked Dennis Allen. I haven't seen too much this year that looks good, but I think you've got to give a coach, I think, more than a year, especially coming into a situation where he had an absolute mixed bag of mistakes that had been formed, personnel moves and trades and things of that nature. They really shorted themselves in the draft the last few years by bringing in vets that really haven't performed.
How about the Bills? I mean, they're 5-7, and it just seems like recently they're starting to play the way many thought they would play from the beginning, in terms of playing some pretty good defense, getting some pressure on the quarterback, running the football, and not relying everything on the arm of Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, Can they win out and be 9-7 and possibly vie for a playoff spot, or you don't see that? I mean, they've been playing pretty well last couple games.
I mean, they could. I don't see it, although the one encouraging thing is their defense is playing much better. The problem with the Bills is putting together their defense playing well and their offense playing well at the same time. It seems like their offense started out hot, the defense was terrible. Now it's the reverse. I think one of the keys is they've got to get C.J. Spiller more involved in the offense. They've been doing that. He is in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the league in terms of his elusiveness, his playmaking ability. He averages over 7 yards every time he touches the ball, and there aren't many offensive players that can do that. So the key is going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. If he can minimize his mistakes, take his shots downfield, get some time to throw, I think they could run the table. They got a good schedule. They got a good schedule the rest of the way.
And how about if you had a power rank, who would be your top teams right now? If you power rank obviously there was a Thursday night game, but counting everything you've seen so far, who's your top 3, 4, 5 teams, Frank?
Well, I think Houston has got to be right up there. They're playing great on both sides of the ball. They've got a running game, they can pass when they need to, and they've got a defense that can stop them running the pass. I think the Broncos have got to be up there. I mean, Peyton Manning looks fantastic. I think he looks better than anybody
expected.
Doesn't he?
Unbelievable.
And he allows that defense to be better because he gets a lead and allows that defense to rush the quarterback, to put pressure on, and that makes the defense even better. Patriots are looking good. Getting Aqib Talib, I think, is helping their defensive secondary. Then in the NFC, I think it's a little harder to say. Atlanta is obviously the best team record-wise, but I don't think they're as good as their record. I think they've got some holes. They've had kind of an easy schedule. They've won some really close games. Give them credit, they've won.
Right.
But I say Atlanta's and the Giants. I think their defense is starting to come on. If their defense can play better and Eli Manning can get back on track, I think the Giants will be there too.
All right, we're going to talk a little fantasy football in terms of individual players. Who's been who's in Frank's penthouse and who's in his doghouse at this point of the season? More on the Sunday Sports in just a moment. We're talking with Frank Harafi, the fantasy professor, and we'll talk about individual players late in the season. First of all, if you're in a league and you're trying to secure that playoff spot, what's your strategy right now, Frank?
Fill any holes you have. I mean, if you've got a hole at any position, see if you can trade, use the waiver wire, do whatever you can to fill your holes, and look at what's happened the last 3 or 4 weeks. So you might have a name player who hasn't been producing and a no-name player who's been producing. Go with the production. Look at the most recent production. That kind of thing usually carries on into the playoffs.
Frank, you got 2 pages of notes right here. I want you to tell everyone about waivers, start, and bench. Go ahead.
Well, in terms of waivers, these are folks that I would pick up this week. In terms of your filling some holes. Nick Foles, he's not going to set the world on fire, but he's playing better. If you need some depth at quarterback, I think he's a good option. He's going to throw the ball a lot. Bryce Brown's somebody I've been touting all year. I picked him up long before he got a chance to start because of LaShawn McCoy's injury. He's looked fantastic 2 games in a row. Mike Thomas, who was with Jacksonville, he's now with Detroit. He's a great pickup simply because of injuries. Titus Young is out, done for the year, and Ryan Broyles tore his ACL. So other than Calvin Johnson, it's Mike Thomas. And that offense, they throw the ball a lot. Riley Cooper, kind of taking over for Deshaun Jackson in Philadelphia. Montel Owens, if you're desperate for a starting running back, he's starting this week in Jacksonville, and he's going to get a lot of work. And Jarius Wright, Percy Harvin just went on the IR. So in Minnesota, he's a rookie. He's gotten a lot of targets, so if you're desperate for a third wide receiver, Jarius Wright's a good pickup. Start and bench, I mean, obviously, everybody knows to start Drew Brees and start Aaron Rodgers, but some guys that are kind of flying under the radar, Brandon Myers, the Raiders tight end. One bright spot for the Raiders this year has been Brandon Myers. He's been absolutely fantastic. Already has more receptions than any Raiders tight end in a season.
Wow.
Putting up a lot of yards. Last week, 14 catches, 130 yards on a touchdown against Cleveland. So he's a good start. I think Torrey Smith is a good start against Pittsburgh. They shut him down last time. I think they're going to make sure they get on the ball this time. CJ Spiller, great start every week. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis has really been coming on. He's had a not so good of a year, but the last couple games he's really running hard. That's the kind of thing you want to pay attention to. I think you stick with Green Ellis. And Dallas, their linebackers are banged up, so you can run on Dallas now. So he's a good start. And Giant wide receivers. I think the Giant passing game is going to be turning it around. And I think Victor Cruz and Akeem Nicks, who've been kind of disappointing this year, are going to be there down the stretch.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of fantasy players, I mentioned who's in your penthouse this year. Who has done very well? The obvious ones, like you mentioned, the Breezes, the Rodgers. Yeah. But who has come out of kind of the shadows and been good for you, and who is in your doghouse right now because you expected big things that didn't come through?
This has been really the year of the rookie for the penthouse. You've got Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III are top 5 quarterbacks, and for the first year, that's just
amazing,
unheard of. You just don't see that. Doug Martin and Trent Richardson have been terrific rookie running backs. Just burst on the scene, and they're both top 5 at their position. Randall Cobb has kind of come out of nowhere in Green Bay, taking advantage of an injury to Greg Jennings and some other injuries to their other receivers. He's been a terrific option. Brandon Marshall, who has been great in the past, kind of got lost in Miami. But going to Chicago, being reunited with Jay Cutler, he's just been absolutely incredible. Already has just about 1,000 yards and over 90 receptions already. Wow. So those are guys, some of my penthouse guys. Outhouse is much more full this year, it seems like. A lot of quarterbacks, Phillip Rivers having a terrible year. He just doesn't look the same. I don't know if it's an injury. I don't know if it's just age. He's not really old by quarterback standards, but he just looks terrible. Michael Vick didn't have a good year, got hurt. Looks like he's played his last game in Philadelphia. Who knows what's going to happen to him? Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Buffalo quarterback. Fantasy-wise, he's always been good. Not really this year. Incredibly inconsistent. Darren McFadden. Everybody thought Darren. If you would have polled fantasy experts this year before the season started, I think he was the consensus #1 running back. And he, even before he was hurt, he was doing really little to nothing. There's a zone blocking scheme there now. It's new. He isn't adjusting to it. Looks terrible.
All right, Nate, I was being kind saying the doghouse, but you put it on the money. It was definitely the outhouse. I like that term better. Frank Carampi, he is the fantasy professor. You can check it out at, what's your website? TheFantasyProfessor.com. Check it out. It's a good one. Frank, thanks for joining us. We'll see you during the playoffs in January.
Sounds good.
All right,
Thanks,
we're back with another fantasy, but certainly not a professor, the great Railbird, coming up next. Stay with us.